Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wa ba'd. We come to the next lesson among the leadership lessons from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. And that message is that leadership rule, the leadership lesson is that the goal must always come first. The goal is supreme, the goal must always come first, the goal must precede and supersede every other consideration, especially consideration of personal feelings and likes and dislikes. And subhanAllah, this is of course every lesson of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when you read it you feel that this is the most important one. But this one particularly, I always feel that one of the biggest reasons today of the discord between Muslims is personal likes and dislikes, nothing else. I just don't like somebody, I don't like this about them, and so you cannot work with them. The very big issue of leadership is that if you want to be a leader, you have to learn to work with people you don't like. Working with people you like, you don't have to learn that. That's, it's a pleasure. But there may be, and very often there are people who have critical skills and critical talents, but they have, social skills of a porcupine or something, So difficult to get along with. I mean, they have no manners, or Allah knows what, whatever it is. And for that reason now you lose a person who could have critically contributed to the success of your goal because you could not get along with that person at a personal level. Now Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam exemplified this, like all other things, to a level of perfection. Khalid ibn Walid and Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhuma, these were two young men. They were both from the same generation as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they were much younger. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu also was around the same age. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu was probably around 25 or something like this, 25, 26 when he came to Islam. Suhaib al-Rumi himself was like that, he was 25, 26 when he came to Islam. Now Khalid ibn Walid and Amr ibn al-As were young men. Their fathers actually were the contemporaries of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But these two were the sons of those fathers, but they were the same generation in the sense that they all lived at the same time. Now when Fatah Makkah happened, Khalid bin Walid left the place and went away. He didn't want to remain in Makkah and he did not accept Islam at that time. So also Amr ibn al-As. Amr ibn al-As, as a matter of fact, went off to Habasha, he went off to Abyssinia, because he was also a personal friend of An-Najashi, who was the king of Abyssinia. So Amr ibn al-As took a group of people with him and they decided to go, and they said, we'll go and live in Habasha. And he knew that An-Najashi liked leather handicrafts very much. So Amr ibn al-As took a whole lot of leather handicrafts as gifts for An-Najashi, and they took a ship and they went off to Abyssinia. Now when they landed there, Amr ibn al-As put his people in a camp and he said, let me first go and meet An-Najashi personally myself, alone, and then I will call the rest of you. Now, as he was entering the palace of An-Najashi, he saw a man coming out of the palace, and he knew this man, he knew he was a Muslim, he knew he was from Medina, so he suspected that this man had been sent by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he went to meet Najashi, Najashi was very happy to see him, his good friend. He asked him, what did you bring for me? And he said, I brought these gifts for you, I know you like them. So Najashi was very happy. So Amr ibn al-As thought that, right, I'm on to a good thing now, so let me take advantage of the situation. So he said some uncomplimentary things to An-Najashi about this man who came from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, also implying uncomplimentary things about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the reaction of An-Najashi was completely unexpected for Amr ibn al-As. An-Najashi slammed him in the face. He slammed him in the face so hard that he started bleeding from his nose, and his clothes got covered in blood. Now Amr ibn al-As was a warrior himself, but he is standing now in the court of An-Najashi. So if he moves a finger, you got all the guards of the king around him, there's no way he can do anything. So he just kept quiet, he didn't say anything. Now after hitting him, An-Najashi said to him, he said, look, stop this rubbish that you are talking. He said, go and accept the deen of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, Allah is with him and he will be successful. He said, stop this thing, I am giving you advice, you are my friend. And then An-Najashi took pity on him, on his appearance, on this, his clothes got ruined because of his beating. So he gave him a new thobe. So Amr ibn al-As came out of the palace, and his friends are all very happy. He says, oh, he's been honored by a new dress. And Amr ibn al-As knew what happened, how come he got this new dress. So what he did was, he did a funny thing. What he did was that in the night, he left his friends camped where they were, he didn't tell them anything. He quietly sneaked out in the night and he went back to Hijaz. And he went to Medina. So his friends, he abandoned them in Abyssinia. He just left and went away. As he neared Medina, he saw two other people. They were pitching camp. And when he got close to them, he saw that one of them was Khalid ibn Walid, and the other one was another companion of Khalid ibn Walid. So he asked Khalid ibn Walid, he said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Medina to accept Islam. Because I think this is this is there to stay. And so I think we should join Islam. So Amr ibn al-As said, I am also coming with the same idea. So they both came to Medina together to accept Islam. Now who is Khalid ibn Walid? Khalid ibn Walid is the man who in Uhud was responsible for the killing of 70 Sahaba, Ridwanullahi alayhim ajmain, among whom was Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib radiallahu anhu, the death of whom caused Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam untold grief. But when Khalid bin Walid and Amr ibn al-As came, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did a very strange thing. And from my reading of the seerah, I may be wrong, but I know of only two instances where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did this. And what did he do? He stood up to welcome Khalid bin Walid, and his shawl which he was wearing, he put that on the ground and he made Khalid bin Walid sit on that. The only other time that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that, to the best of my knowledge, is for his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha. Once when Fatima radiallahu anha came in to meet him, he stood up and then he put his shawl on the ground and he made his daughter sit on it out of his love for her. A strange behavior. Here is a man who is from the enemy. Here is a man who is responsible, and his battle tactics were responsible for the killing of somebody who really loved so much, like Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib. And the man has now placed himself in your power, and what do? You honor the man. You honor the man. Why? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for him the goal of Islam, for Islam to have supremacy, this goal superseded everything else, including his likes and dislikes. So Khalid bin Walid can be anybody, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not looking at the face of Khalid bin Walid, he was looking at the talent and the capability of Khalid bin Walid. And he was saying to himself that if this man can turn the battle around, then that is the man we want. Because if this man is fighting on our side, this is what he is capable of doing. That is his talent. He is preparing the next line of command. So Khalid bin Walid accepted Islam, and not only did he accept Islam, and not only did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam give him honor, but he also appointed him commander-in-chief of the army. Now who is the appointing commander-in-chief? Someone who came into Islam. Allah knows best. I don't mean to cast aspersions on the niyyah of the Sahaba, but someone who came into Islam reluctantly when Islam had already spread and when Islam had already become powerful. He is not among the Sabiqun al-Awwalun. Illa masha'Allah. Somebody once said something about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam got very angry. And he said to that person and the others, he said, when none of you believed in me, he believed in me. When none of you was there to support me, he supported me. And he said, today you talk about him? He said, who are you compared to Abu Bakr? So you are nobody. So here is this young man Khalid ibn Walid who is coming into Islam. Allah knows the niyyah of people. But if you look at the circumstances, he is not coming into Islam when Islam is weak. He is not coming into Islam because of his direct belief in Tawheed and because he believes this is the best way. He comes to that belief at a time when Islam has already triumphed. Yet what does Rasulullah do? Rasulullah makes Khalid ibn Walid commander-in-chief of the army over the heads of other people who were, Allah alam, equally if not better qualified. Ubaidullah ibn Jarrah radiallahu anhu, for example, who eventually took over the command from Khalid bin Walid in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Umar ibn al-Khattab himself, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, they were all warriors, they were all people who were capable of commanding. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made Khalid bin Walid the commander-in-chief of the army. And then he gave him a title. What was the title of Khalid bin Walid? Saifullah. Saifullah, the sword of Allah. There is a beautiful story which is an aside, but I will tell you about Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu. And the story is Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu, in his last moments of his life, when he was dying, a friend came to see him. And Khalid bin Walid said to his friend, he took off his shirt and he said to his friend, he said, look at my back, look at my body. He said, there is not an inch, there is not a piece of skin on my body from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet which has not suffered an injury in the path of Allah. He said, I have wounds everywhere. Every part of my body has some scar or the other which I acquired in one battle or another. But I am dying today in my bed like a camel. He said, Allah did not give me shahada. I am not dying as a shaheed. I am dying in my bed as a camel. He said, look at my feet. He's saying to his friend, he's very sad. Very sad. He said, look at my feet. I am dying in my bed as a camel. And this is the benefit of having good friends, wise friends. You know what his friend told him? He said, do not be sad. He said, do not be sad. Allah will give you darajat. But he said, your fate was sealed when the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave you the title Saifullah, the sword of Allah. He said, how can the sword of Allah fall in battle? He said, that you will not die in battle, your fate was sealed when the Messenger of Allah gave you the title Saifullah. He said, because the sword of Allah cannot fight, cannot fall in battle. He said, this is the price for that title, Saifullah. And that is the reason why in the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, for various other incidents and issues, we won't go into that, but Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu strongly recommended that Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu must be changed from, and his command must be taken from him and given to somebody else. But Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu's comment was that the sword of Allah with the Messenger of Allah has unsheathed. He said, Abu Bakr will not put it back in the case. He said, Abu Bakr will not sheath the sword again. Now this Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu, that talent Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw in him, when all that there was to see was a rebellious young man who had been fighting against you all your life. And he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he accepted Islam and he said, Ya Rasulullah, give me the opportunity. He said, I fought against you all your life. Give me the opportunity to use that talent now in the path of Allah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used him. Amr ibn al-As, the conqueror, the governor of Egypt, the conqueror of many battles. How did that happen? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam easily could have given the order the moment they came into Medina. He could have easily given the command to arrest them and he could have had them both executed. Who was there to question? And he could have said, this is retaliation for what you did to my uncle. But he didn't do that. He did not do that. He honored them. Why? Because the goal is supreme. Islam is supreme. Nothing else comes in the way. My personal likes, my dislikes, who I like, who I don't like, makes no difference. Makes no difference. The other story on this is the story of Wahshi radiallahu anhu. And the story is that two of the Tabi'in went to Wahshi radiallahu anhu and they asked him, they said, please tell us the story of how you killed Hamza radiallahu anhu. So Wahshi radiallahu anhu said to them, he said, I will tell you the story the same way as I told it to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he asked me the same question. So Wahshi said, I was a slave and I wanted to get my freedom and there was no way I could get my freedom. I didn't have the money to buy my freedom. My master was not willing to release me. When the Quraysh were getting ready for the battle of Uhud, he said, my master came to me and said, if you kill the uncle of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I will free you. Because his uncle had died in Badr. So he said, this is retaliation. My uncle was killed in Badr by the people of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if you kill the uncle of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then I will release you. So Wahshi said, as far as I was concerned, I had nothing against the uncle of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All I was interested in was getting my freedom. He said, I am from a people who are very good at throwing the spear. And he said, at 100 paces I can put a spear through a ring. So he said, I took my spear and I went in the battle. He said, I had no desire to fight anybody. I did not fight anybody. I was not taking part in the battle. I had only one goal, and that goal was to kill Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib radiallahu anhu. So he said, even in the battle I did not engage with anyone. I was looking for Hamza, and he said, I saw Hamza radiallahu anhu fighting. He said, I saw him in the middle of the battle. And Hamza radiallahu anhu, like Ali radiallahu anhu, was ambidextrous. He used to use both his hands. So he said Hamza radiallahu anhu had a sword in each hand and he was fighting with two swords. And he said his eyes were everywhere. He was totally and completely alert. He was fighting with two swords. His eyes were everywhere. And I was afraid that he will see me, so I hid behind a rock. And I was waiting for my chance. He said at that time, one of the enemies came before Hamza radiallahu anhu, and he said Hamza radiallahu anhu, with his sword, he slashed him straight through the body, across. And nothing happened. So the enemy said to him, you missed. He said, Hamza radiallahu anhu told him, take a step forward. He said the man took a step and he broke in two. Now imagine the force of that sword, which would have gone through the armor, through the whole body of the man, come out the other side. The man didn't even feel the stroke. What is the power of that? And then Wahshi radiallahu anhu said, at that moment Hamza radiallahu anhu relaxed. He said, the minute he relaxed, I saw my chance. He said, I stood up from behind the rock and I threw my spear. He said, my spear entered his chest and came out on the other side of the body. He said, in that state, Hamza turned towards me. He tried to take a step forward and he said, I was terrified. But he said he could not do anything and he fell. And then he said, I waited for some time to make sure that he was dead. He said, I was afraid to go near the body. He said, I was afraid to go near him even when he had fallen. He said, when I was completely sure that he had died, he said, I went there, I pulled out my spear and I went back to the camp. He said, I did not meet anybody, I did not fight with anybody. I had come for a purpose, my purpose was over, I went back to the camp. And he said after Fatah Makkah, he said, I left Makkah and I went off to Taif. And then he said the battle of Hunain happened, Taif fell. So I decided to migrate and go off to Abyssinia or somewhere. And he said, some of my friends told me, how far are you going to run? How much are you going to run? Because Wahshi was one of the people on whom there was a bounty, a price on his head. So people said, how much are you going to run this? What is the sense in that? They said, go to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, accept Islam and he will forgive whatever you have done. So Wahshi radiallahu anhu said, I went to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I completely covered myself, I hid my face and everything so that only my eyes were visible. He said, I came and sat in front of him and I said, Ya Rasulullah, if I accept Islam, will my sins be forgiven? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yes. So he put his hand forward, he said, I accept Islam, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu annaka Rasulullah. And he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took my hand and he accepted my Islam. And he said, when he accepted my Islam, then I uncovered my face and he saw me. And he said to me, tell me the story, how did you kill my uncle? And Wahshi radiallahu anhu said, I told him the story the same way that I told you now. They said, what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wept. And then he said to me only one thing. He said, whenever you come into my presence, he said, do not sit in front of me because if I look at you, my memory of my uncle is revived. So he said, sit where I cannot see you. Sit in the back or sit on the side somewhere, but don't sit in front because it brings alive that grief. Wahshi radiallahu anhu lived. And Wahshi radiallahu anhu said, I made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should forgive me for killing Hamza radiallahu anhu. And he said, then came the battle with Musaylima al-Kazzab. And he said, I took my spear in that battle. And he said, I made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I said, oh Allah, make it possible for me to kill this man with the same spear. So when I stand before you, I will be able to say, oh Allah, with this spear I killed the best of them, and with this spear I killed the worst of them. And he said, I got a chance. And he went inside the fort of Musaylim al-Kadhab. And he said, I saw him standing there, and I threw my spear. And he said, my spear was true. And it hit Musaylim al-Kadhab, and Musaylim al-Kadhab died. And at that time there was also another man who had the sword of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave his sword. he took his sword and he said, who will fulfill the right of this sword? And Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu stood up and he said, I will fulfill the right of the sword. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't give it to him. Some other people stood up. Until this man called Dujana, he stood up. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, give me the sword. I will fulfill the right of the sword. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the sword to him. And he tied a red piece of cloth around his head. And he took the sword and he walked in front of the army prancing, holding the sword like that. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes walking like that except in a situation like this. And it so happened that in this battle, Dujana radiallahu anhu also came to Musaylim al-Kadhab at the same time. So Wahshi threw his spear and Dujana hit him with a sword, and Allah knows best which one was the cause of the man's dying. May Allah give the reward to them. But that is the story of Wahshi radiallahu anhu, of how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forgave him, even though he had committed a crime and he had committed an act which caused Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam so much pain. How did he do that? Why did he do that? Because for him the goal was supreme. Not personal likes and dislikes, not who is my friend, who is not my friend. No. The goal is supreme. We come to the next lesson, which is walking the talk. Not preaching the message, living the message. This is the biggest problem of the Muslims today. We are good preachers, but we don't live our own message. So we will sit and give a dars on the rights of the husband and the wife. We will sit and give a dars on the importance of marriage and the importance of akhlaq. And then we go home and our own akhlaq with our wives and husbands are the worst. The Muslim is a demonstrator, not a preacher. And therefore we need to live the message of Islam, not just preach the message of Islam. And why is it necessary to live the message of Islam? Because people listen with their eyes. People do not listen with their ears. People listen with their eyes. People don't care what you say. They look to see what you do. And that's very important for us to ensure that we practice what we preach. Walking the talk. The famous hadith of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, where a man went to her and said, please tell me something about the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she asked him a strange question. She said, do you not read the Quran? He said, yes, I read the Quran. She said, he was the walking Quran. And that's the reason for the importance of the seerah. It's a strange thing today that even in madaris, even in our Darul Ulooms, seerah is not a full subject in itself. I've never understood why. I don't know, this the whole curriculum of our madaris and darul ulooms needs to be looked at and needs to be redesigned. Seerah is not a subject. The students study seerah, they study bits and pieces of the of the seerah as they come to them, either in the asbab and nuzul of the ayat of Quran or in some ahadith which they read. But seerah itself as a topic is not taught. Whoever reads seerah will read out of his own interest or something. And this is a very, very major defect in our curriculum and in our teaching methodologies. The seerah is the manifestation of the Quran. The Quran is the theory. The seerah is the practice, is the practical part of that theory. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Aqimus salah. Establish the salah. How? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni yusalli. He said, pray as you have seen me pray. So if you don't want to see how Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, then how do you establish salah, which is a hukum of Allah Jalla wa Ala? The seerah is the manifestation of the Quran. If you read an ayah of the Quran and say, how am I supposed to do this? Where will you find the answer of that? In the seerah. In the seerah. The hadith is part of seerah, not the other way around. What is sunnah? Sunnah is seerah. So seerah is very, very important. And why is the seerah important? Because this is what convinced people. The Sahaba were highly successful in their da'wah, even though, if I ask you, for example, tell me how many books did Abu Bakr Siddiq write? Today we are very focused on books. I have written so many books, I am a great author, blah, 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 whatnot, whatnot. Which book did you read? Which book did you study? Alhamdulillah, it's good, we should read, we should study. We don't even do that, but we should do that. However, my point is, which Sahaba wrote books? Which Sahaba were great orators who gave lectures of 3.5 hours each? Nobody. To the best of my knowledge, there is not one single book written by the Sahaba. People recorded the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they recorded the Quran in his lifetime itself. And the sahifas, the recordings, the books that are there are right from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but these are recordings of what Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. They did not write their own books, they did not write commentaries on this, and they did not write tafasir, and they didn't do any of that. Yet, whose dawah is more effective than the dawah of the Sahaba? The Sahaba did not count people who came into Islam in ones and twos and tens and hundreds. They counted them in thousands. Actually, they didn't count them at all because entire countries became Muslim. Entire countries became Muslim. Abu Dhar Ghifari radiallahu anhu is not even known as one of the ulama of the Sahaba. Two huge tribes, two major tribes of the Hijaz became Muslim on his da'wah. Al-Ghifar and Aslam. Why? Because Abu Dhar Ghifari lived Islam. Abu Dhar Ghifari lived Islam. And so also with the other Sahaba, Rizwanullahi alayhim ajmain. They lived Islam. People came to Islam not because of some clever argument, not because of a debate, not because of some great speech. They came into Islam because they actually saw that Sahabi living his religion. And today this is our big problem. Our big problem is that we do not live Islam. We talk about Islam. We argue about Islam. But we do not live Islam. The Sahaba used to say, a famous qawl of the Sahaba, they used to say, Kunu mithlana. They used to tell people, become like us. Which of us today can say this with sincerity to somebody else? Become like us. Now why not? Same Islam. Same Islam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam preached the importance of the rights of neighbors, and he was the best to his neighbors. The people who learned the deen from him were the best to their neighbors. There's a famous story of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, rahmatullah alayh. And they said that the neighbor of Imam Ahmad, who was a non-Muslim, was selling his house. So he quoted a price which was way above the market value, very high price. So somebody came to buy the house. They said, look, I want to buy this house, but this price of yours is crazy. I mean, why are you quoting such a high price? Because the market value of the house is so much and you are quoting like double the market value. For what? The man said, do you know who is my neighbor? He said, who is your neighbor? He said, Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He said, I'm quoting the price because my neighbor is Ahmad bin Hanbal. Rahmatullah alayh. Today, how many of us can say that our neighbor will say this when he sells his house? Maybe he will not even quote a premium, but maybe he will just mention, you know, you're buying this house, I'm not charging a premium on it, but if you buy this house, so and so is your neighbor. And that is a big advantage, that you're living next to this person. How many of us can say that our neighbors will say that? How many of us even know the name of our neighbor? How many of us have visited our neighbor? How many of us have cooked something and sent it to our neighbor? Just like that, for the heck of it. Don't do it if you are in America because they'll sue you, but other than that, any other country? क्या है आकाशवाणी? There's some jinn or something which is talking from somewhere. Seriously, we have to think. Not only neighbors, you know. Let me ask another question. May Allah make us all among those who pray every salah by jama'ah in the masjid. But those of us who pray regularly, in every masjid you will find that the first saf has people who pray regularly, who come either to every salah or to that particular salah. For example, Salatul Fajr, you might find that there are people. So there will be this person who you are seeing in that saf every single day. Yes? How many of you know who that person is? How many of you even know the name of that person? Somebody who is praying salah with you on a daily basis. I find that in places in the West, for example, in America, in Australia and other places, people will take the trouble to find out. Because they are a minority, so they take the trouble to find out. If somebody is coming on a regular basis, you will know something about that person. That's almost default. But in our countries, someone who is praying salah with you on a daily basis, who stands next to you, his shoulder is next to your shoulder, you do not even know his name. Not even his name. You'll be saying salam to him also. After salah and so on, assalamu alaikum, you say salam alaikum, but you do not know who the person is. You have no clue. You do not even know his name. What kind of neighborly behavior is this? I am not even going to the extent of non-Muslim neighbors. Islam does not differentiate between Muslim and non-Muslim. The non-Muslim neighbor does not have less rights than the Muslim. Everyone has the same rights. But I am saying that if you don't even know the name of your Muslim brother who is praying salah with you, standing shoulder to shoulder, what will you know about somebody who is your neighbor who is not even a Muslim? The Quran specifically mentions neighbors you know and neighbors you do not know. Meaning what? Meaning people who are Muslim and people who are not Muslim. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam preached the importance of rights of neighbors, and he was the best of neighbors. He preached the rights of women, and he was the best to his family, to the women in his family. He gave a law 1400 years ago, which gives women rights that women do not even have in today's law in many countries. But unfortunately for 1400 years, even though he gave the law which gave rights to the women, the Muslim men do not give those rights to the women. Islam gives the rights. Muslim men do not give those rights. We have to wake up, because you will be held answerable to Allah for denying the women the rights that Allah gave them. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam preached the value of truthfulness, and he was the most truthful of people. Al-Sadiqul Amin. And this title was given to him by his enemies, not by his friends. Applied Islam is what we need. How do we live Islam? And that is why in the LEC, the Leadership Excellence course that we have been doing for the SBA, we have focused on applied Islam, living Islam. Whatever we teach in that course is focused only on one thing: how will I apply it in my life? And alhamdulillah, we are seeing, even though the course has been around just for about 2 months now, we have been hearing wonderful stories of people who have started applying whatever they learned in that course in their lives, and they are seeing the results of that. Alhamdulillah. Applied Islam. The Sahaba's dawah was applied Islam. It was not preaching Islam. And that's why living Islam is the key to success. We will be held accountable for what we do in our lives. We will be held accountable for our actions. And that's the reason why we must focus always on action. Today, even the ones who are interested in Islam, they have made acquisition of information a hobby. So they are professional course attenders. They go from this course to that course to that course to that course, and they will say, oh, so-and-so is having this course here, so we are going to this course, and so-and-so is having another course, we are going to that course. And if you ask them, in the last 6 months, in the last 1 year, how many courses did you attend? And they'll tell you, oh, fantastic, so many courses. 5, 6, 8 courses, and each course comes with a fat book like that. And if you pile up all those books, then they're probably taller than you are. And you say, all right, now that you have all these books, what are you applying in your life that you learned in that particular course? How many of us can answer that question? I'm not saying nobody can. I'm sure there are people who are applying everything, and they have completely transformed themselves, and they are going around in the world like beacons of light, dispelling darkness everywhere they step. I don't deny any of that. But how many beacons of such light are there? That is the key. Today we have become walking libraries. Those of us who read this book and this book and this book and this book and this book, all in your head. And if you're wearing a turban, you can also accommodate maybe a few more books, because the cloth will keep it together in one place. But then you say, all of these books, where is the distillation of that in your amal? Nothing. All of these great books on akhlaq, where is it visible in my life? Nothing. All of these great ahadith on mu'amilat, where is it visible in my life? Nothing. Then what is the point of this? Except that this knowledge becomes a hujjah against us on the Day of Judgment. May Allah protect us from that. Now obviously the solution to that is not to stop acquiring knowledge. We have to acquire knowledge. Knowledge is very important for us. But the point is that the purpose of acquiring knowledge is to practice that knowledge. And until you practice the knowledge does not give you any benefit. In the case of Islam, the knowledge actually can become a source of problem for us. But even if it is not a sin, does reading a book about cycling, does it teach you how to cycle? You don't have to go to some great scientific discovery. Basic thing like cycling, How do you cycle? I'll give you a 3.5-hour lecture on all the dynamics of cycling. We have to practice what we learn. And that's why the whole focus of my teaching everywhere, as well as all these classes that we have, is only one focus. That is applied Islam. The purpose, the cause of the philosophy, we have a 2-word philosophy behind the Standard Bearers Academy. What is the 2-word philosophy? Applied Islam. That's all. If someone tells you, what is the philosophy behind the Standard Bearers Academy? Tell him, hold your breath, it will take you 10 seconds to understand this. Applied Islam, that's it. End of lecture. Because unless we apply Islam, Islam will not benefit us, and it will not benefit anyone else either. We have to actually apply Islam in our lives if we want the benefit to happen. And why differentiate? Because differentiation creates brand. Why apply Islam? Because applied Islam is differentiation. Why differentiate? Because differentiation creates brand. Brand creates loyalty. People come to the brand, not to the generic form. And loyalty results in influence. If you have loyalty, people are loyal to you, then you can influence those people. How do they become loyal to you? Because you stand out. You differentiate in a positive manner. And that differentiation comes out of applying Islam in our lives. People became Muslim because they fell in love with Muslims. People became Muslims because they fell in love with Islam. Islam will triumph in this world today until the day of judgment in the same way that it triumphed at the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, which is by the winning of hearts. Spreading Islam is not by the sword or the gun. Islam was never spread by the sword or the gun, because when you apply the sword and the gun, you get a lot of dead bodies. And I never saw any dead body reciting the kalima. Islam did not come to kill people. Islam did not come to have wars. Islam was spread by the winning of hearts. Let us not get confused about this whole thing. We need brand, because without brand, you are a grain of rice in a sack. You are still rice, no differentiation. Leaders differentiate. Leaders differentiate. Because for a leader, the most critical thing is to be able to differentiate on the basis of your message. Very critical. Anytime the leader compromises his message, the differentiation is lost. And the value of the message is gone. And that's why I say we have to differentiate on the basis of the message of leadership. Alright? Inshallah, with this we will end today's session. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyil kareem wa alihi wa sahbihi ajmain bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.